Dr. Greg Schwab. When you were doing your research, what was the most startling thing or unusual thing or the thing you weren't really sure of, or that came out differently than maybe you had thought?
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything that really fits that bill, but you know, when you're in school, you read about things like nitrogen loss, and it's, you know, it's interesting to read about, but until you see the difference between those plots. So when you see a lot of nitrogen deficiency symptoms showing up in one plot and same rate of nitrogen with the inhibitor and no nitrogen deficiency symptoms, I think it's seeing is hard to describe when you see those differences. And so I think that's probably the thing that really stands out when you start doing some comparisons. And I would suggest all farmers look at some comparisons on their farm. You know, if you're using just urea without an inhibitor, compare it to urea with an inhibitor. I think that you'll be surprised at how much difference that makes.
And you really have to do your own test strips to do that, because you don't know what the rest of that would have yielded otherwise.
Right.
We don't know the end yield necessarily. Great visual, John, with the money.
Oh, thank you.
And
yeah.
really, when you think about it, there's nothing, the math is exactly right. It's just that normally we don't get to rub the money between our fingers.
That's right. And you know what? It's really sad that we can't see what leaves our farm out there through nitrogen volatility, ammonia volatility, or what's leaching away, because all of that leads to yield. And if we can't keep that nitrogen with that crop, then it's going to hurt us in the pocketbook.
You know, and the worst part is, number one, is we didn't know how good the crop could have been. And secondly, is we don't know until it's too late that we even had a problem.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of fields in western Iowa last summer that by the time they got to tasseling, it was obvious driving through the country they had a huge nitrogen problem because of all the things that have been taught. But by then it was too late to do anything about it.
And
so you have that big knot in your stomach and wondering how bad the yield loss is going to be at harvest time.
And that's why we look at researchers like Greg Benford and Greg Schwab, because they help to give information to the farmer about how to protect the nitrogen and how to make more yield.
You know, one other thing though, we looked at Delaware, and some of yours was published from other areas, Kentucky, but truly the issue is all through areas that raise corn.
Well, it's not only corn, and realize this, that our products are urea fertilizer specific. Either urea or urea containing. They're not crop specific. So if we go out to California, where we have a lot of vegetables grown and a lot of specialty crops, we'll see the same type of increase because loss occurs. Whenever you put your nitrogen out on the surface, it's subject to volatility and the conditions are right, you're going to lose your nitrogen.
You know, on my farm over the years, I always kind of I'm in Kansas, it was March 1. I was worried about using urea after March 1 because of the unpredictability of the temperatures and the moisture and that sort of thing. But as I was studying for this show, there's really a huge amount of volatilization in the winter that I had no idea.
You're right. And you know what? I think from an industry standpoint, we probably thought that if you applied your nitrogen when the temperature was below, maybe 40 degrees Fahrenheit, you didn't have any loss. You were okay. But we had a young researcher that contacted us that said he'd been doing research in Montana at temperatures around 24 to 26 degrees Fahrenheit, and he was applying the urea when there was snow on the ground, and he was having upwards of a 38% loss over a 3-week time period. 38% in 3 weeks in cold weather, yes. And so what happens is that we find out the key ingredient to making that occur is moisture. You know, when I was living in Oklahoma, I remember having snow on the streets, and I remember the crews coming out and throwing out urea to melt that snow and ice.
Right.
So what happens is it gets on that snow, it causes the moisture to be attracted to it, it starts hydrolysis, and we lose our nitrogen through ammonia loss.
You know, one thing we haven't brought out with the AGROTAIN products, the protection is at the molecular level. It's not a coating on the outside of the prell.
It is a coating, but you're right, it is at the molecular level because it is working on an enzyme. And it's stopping that enzyme from converting that urea to nitrogen at the surface so we have loss. And it allows that nitrogen to move through the soil profile, through the organic layer, and then it starts to break down and and form the different nitrogen species.
So since it's at that level, then if I'm trying to obtain it, I have to get it manufactured that way. I can't wait till the urea gets to my supplier to have it applied?
Well, it needs to go to your supplier, and your supplier will do it for you.
So he can blend it right there?
Blend it right there. And we really think that AGROTAIN treated urea ought to be the conventional form of urea compared to what it is, because urea is a really good product. It just has that one problem of loss, that ammonia volatility.
It appears that there's issues in the market that are pressing urea to be a major supplier of our nitrogen, and it's my perception that it's because it's reasonably shipped around the world.
That's right. That's right. It's probably the most easy form of nitrogen to get today. And it has a high analysis, 46%. It's easy to store, easy to transport, easy to handle. It just has that one loss mechanism, the ammonia volatility that occurs when it's surface applied.
And so if I'm a developing country that has a source of natural gas, but I don't have a use for that natural gas, the best way to ship that natural gas to the United States or other countries is to make urea?
To make urea. And regardless of what people say, that we want to be not dependent on other countries for oil, we are in some ways with natural gas in the urea production.
Is most of the urea we use in this country come from other sources around the world?
Yeah, I think primarily most of it does. I don't know the number. Is it 40% produced in the U.S., something like that? So.
Sure. Well, the other sources are more easily transported within our borders.
That's right.
So when we come back from the break, we're going to ask questions from everybody out here in the crowd. So if you would hold your hand up so they can get you a mic, they want to have you queued up and let you be ready to ask those questions to this panel. I'll remind everybody who the panel is. We have Dr. Greg Schwab here at my left, and he is from I'm looking through your whole resume. You're from the University of Kentucky.
University of Kentucky.
Yeah, I was going through the whole thing here. So. And we have the other Dr. Greg. I'm sorry, I lost the name.
University of Delaware.
At University of Delaware. And then, of course, John Hassel with AGROTAIN. We're going to go to a break. Please have your questions ready, and we'll be taking those right after this break.